we can have a great Sunday morning program, and that only matters to the people that come on Sunday mornings. And so it's like, how do we get the gospel to folks that have no intention of coming on a Sunday morning? Because I'm not an outgoing guy, and so it wasn't like I could just go and sit in a coffee shop or something like that and just build relationships.
Yeah, that's not you.
Yeah, that's just not my personality. But I did know football.
Right now, I'm sitting in North Tulsa, Oklahoma at Crossover Bible Church with Pastor Philip Abode, who's also the executive director of Crossover Prep Academy. And I'm here to just have a conversation with you and invite you to unpack just this word transformation, which is a big thing for the EFCA. As you know, our EFCA mission statement is that we multiply transformational churches among all people. And we want to see people's lives transformed. We want to see our communities transformed. We want to see churches transformed. And God is definitely up to a work of transformation here. And so just share briefly an overview of some of the kinds of ministries and ways in which you guys are touching the community.
Yeah, so Crossover Bible Church has been here since 2006. And in 2012, we realized that because of just all the issues facing our community, it's like, okay, it's going to take more than Bible studies to see transformation. It's not going to take less than that. We say it's going to take more than that. And how do we more comprehensively serve our community? Okay. So in 2012, we started a separate nonprofit organization called Crossover Community Impact. Okay. And we started with youth sports. And so we started with like one youth football team that eventually grew into sports year-round. We had football, basketball, baseball, track. And from there, we started an after-school program and summer day camp. Okay. And the unique thing about that program is that we hired high schoolers to work as the mentors and tutors. Okay. And so instead of a volunteer-run program, it became like a youth jobs program. We called them street leaders. Okay. And then from there, we started Crossover Health Services. So it was a family medical clinic that helped meet the healthcare needs in our community. Because when we started the clinic, for every one doctor in North Tulsa, there was 26 in Midtown and the rest of the city. So there was an access to healthcare issues. And so we were able to start a medical clinic. Then 2015, we started our development company that started building and remodeling homes in North Tulsa. So to help promote first-time home ownership and living in the community is a big thing for us. And so our full-time staff are required to live in North Tulsa. And so if one of them was like, hey, can you build a house up for me? We would buy an old bolted up house, fix it up. And then even some of our members were also feeling that call to move to North Tulsa. And so we would fix up houses for them. And it's cool because our construction company is also a jobs training program. Okay. And so we'll get guys out of prison or who just don't have construction skills that can learn those. And now they're able to provide for their families. And then lastly, we started Crossover Preparatory Academy, which initially started as an all-boy private school. But now we have boys and girls, and it's a 6th through 12th grade private school here in North Tulsa.
Wow, that's quite a menu, quite a transformation menu that God is using here. When I think about transformation, I think about the fact that 2 Corinthians 5:17 says, if any man, if anyone, if any boy, if any girl, no matter where they live, be in Christ, he or she is a new creature, a new creation. The old has passed away, the new has come. That's personal transformation. So Philip, if you wouldn't mind, share with us briefly your story of personal transformation. How did you come to know the Lord as your Savior and King? And then a second question, what led you into pastoral ministry?
Yeah, it goes all the way back to my days at University of Tulsa in college. I had grown up going to church. My grandmother raised me. But I remember in high school, I was taking a Latin class. And I was learning about Roman mythology and all of that, and just hearing about how they used to really believe that all the Roman gods and stuff were real. And I remember thinking to myself, like, well, what if 1,000 years from now they'll start talking about Christian mythology? And so it was like at that point, that's when I say I became an agnostic, not really knowing what I believed. And I was a pretty good student at that point too. And so I was like, okay, if I'm going to take myself seriously as a smart person, I can't really believe these things. But I would say taking Latin is what really started planting those seeds. So by the time I got to the University of Tulsa, you know, and the freedom of not having to go to church anymore, that's when really I started doing my own thing, getting wild. I remember my grandmother used to say, like, when I was getting ready to leave for college, she's like, hey, you got to have God. Like, don't leave God, get in the church. And in my mind, I was thinking, but I was the one earning all the scholarships. I was the one doing the work in the classroom and all of that. And it was really, I had a teammate of mine who went on staff with a campus ministry, who he'd come to my dorm room once a week and say, hey, do you want to come to Bible study? And I had enough of a church background that I felt guilty for saying no. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to come. And I literally fall asleep in this small group Bible study. But he used that opportunity to have lunch with me and explain the one verse bridge illustration using Romans 6:23. Yep. And I would say that was the first time, just it was something about that visual. We're saying that I was on man's side, separated from God, that I really understood that my sin separated me from God. Wow. And I remember even then, like, just thinking to myself, like, okay, I know where I'm at if any of this is true. And so it's like I still wasn't willing to give my life or turn away from all the stuff I was doing for a God I didn't know was real. And even then he was like, hey, do you want to pray the prayer? And I was like, yeah, because I was still, struggling with people pleasing. Yeah. I didn't want him to think that I was a bad guy because I sit here and admitted I was on man's side. Yes. And so I was like, well, what's keeping you from praying? And I didn't want to say all the sin I love. Yes. So I prayed the prayer, but didn't, no change came, anything like that. And it was about 6 months after that point where really all the things that I relied on to be me was getting stripped away. Like my football career, for the first time in my life, I was a bench warmer on the football team. Like I was always like one of the star players, but that got taken away. I was even struggling academically. And so that started, being an issue for me. And then even just socially, like relationship with the ladies, like just having issues there. And so it got me to a point where I was really depressed and trying to figure out, okay, who am I? How did I get to where I was? And I remember reflecting on my life, just thinking about growing up in Stillwater and just how a lot of the town came around and helped my grandmother as she, raised us. And I remember she was 80 years old when I graduated from high school. Wow. And as a kid, I had some of the dads in my life who, one of them set me down. He was a pastor and he was like, hey, in Psalms, I think it's Psalms 90, where it says that we're guaranteed 70 years. And he's like, hey, it's a blessing that your grandma's here because we're only guaranteed 70 years. And that came back to me because I was like, what if my grandma would have died at 70? I would have been 8. And it's like, what would have happened to me and my brother had she not been here? And so it was like seeing how all these things like worked out just right in my life to get me to that point. I was like, I can't sit up here and act like I don't know if God is real or not. Like he was clearly in the background of my life taking care of me all the way through. And it was for the first time that thought came to my mind that I'm blessed. And it wasn't like a cliche. It was like, no, God has blessed me. And so it was that day where I realized I had to make a decision because I was like, okay, if God is real, that means that heaven and hell are real. And I know which side I'm on. And so am I willing to give my life to God? And so that's when I made that decision to trust and follow Jesus. And really shortly after that, got involved in campus ministry because I knew I had a lot of teammates like me, friends like me who grew up going to church and thought we were okay just because we went to church as a kid and got baptized as a kid. I always say that I was like a practical atheist. Like I would say I was a Christian, but anyone who looked at my life would say, you don't believe in God, just based on how I was living. But it was then that, God really changed my heart and got involved in this campus ministry, started talking to people about the Lord. And that was when I was like, okay, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to help people see what it looks like to be a genuine follower of Jesus Christ.
Thanks for sharing that. What year of college were you when you trusted Christ?
It was right in the middle. So I was in school for 5 years. So being a football player, you know, it was free. And so I was like, well, I rushed.
Right.
But it was literally right in the middle of my college year. So my third year, like it was on Thanksgiving break, actually, when that happened.
Isn't it amazing how a Latin class as a high school student had a ripple effect on your life? But taking Latin at the time, you probably had no idea. What did you major in at University of Tulsa?
I majored in applied mathematics.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And so what were you planning to do with that before you share with us how you got called into pastoral ministry?
Right. Well, before that, I was majoring in chemical engineering.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, I was good at math and science, and they made the most money out of college, and so that's what I was going to do. But then when God really got a hold of my heart to go to ministry, and I was like, okay, I want to go. I was either going to go on a staff with a campus ministry and then go to seminary, or go straight to seminary. And when a friend of mine kind of shared his heart about planting a church in North Tulsa, that's when I was like, okay, that's what we're going to do. We're going to plant this church in North Tulsa, go to seminary, then come. And so at that point, I was like, okay, I'm only majoring in chemical engineering for the money.
Right.
I know I'm about to go to ministry, so let me just get a math degree because that's where I had the most credits and I like math.
Okay. So you basically, within a couple of year window from the time Romans 6:23 changed your life until you went to seminary, it was your call, it sounds like, was just sort of this gradual next step, and you went to seminary.
Yeah. So it was about a 2.5 year period. Like this campus ministry had a great summer discipleship program. And so I went to that a couple of summers and just really sensed the call to go into full-time ministry. And like I said, the other pastor is like, hey, he grew up in North Tulsa. He's like, hey, I'm going to plant this church. And I had a heart for that because I grew up in Stillwater's version of North Tulsa. Okay. And so being a part of a church in an under-resourced community. So that's how I grew up. Okay. Like I said, my grandmother, who was a widow, raised me, welfare, food stamps, all of that.
So you've shared your personal story of transformation, how you made that transition to pursue ministry. And when you went to seminary, it sounds like that you intended from the time you enrolled in seminary to come back to Tulsa, here to North Tulsa, and to engage in this kind of ministry that you're in now.
Yes.
So while you're in seminary, this is where you were pointing. The road was headed back here. So as we think about your personal salvation story, how does that personal salvation story of you, Pastor Philip, echo and motivate what you want to see happen in the lives of individuals through this ministry that God has entrusted to you here at Crossover?
Yeah. No, and that's really where it all started, was having grown up in the church. And unfortunately, it wasn't a healthy church. And seeing a lot of examples of how our Christianity kind of just stays on Sunday morning, where you see folks who, getting a service and emotional experience. And then all throughout the week, living just like everybody else and all of that. And so I really had a passion for helping folks see what it looked like to trust and follow Jesus in all of life. And so wanting to be a part of a church that really helped that. And so that's where it was like, okay, let's go get equipped for ministry. Because realizing that, particularly in the African-American context, a lot of us didn't have access to great seminaries when it came to just the history of the African-American church. And so that was a big value of ours. Let's go and get equipped. And thankfully at the time, Dallas Theological Seminary was very intentional about African-Americans getting that kind of exposure. And so I had scholarships to go. And by God's grace, I was able to go for free to DTS through all the different scholarships and working at UPS and all of that
stuff. You did
that
on graveyards, right? Overnight?
Yeah, overnight. Yeah.
Were you a loader or a packer, or what did you do?
I was a package sorter. Okay. So 11 p.m. till 2 a.m. doing all of that.
And then seminary classes during the daytime?
Yeah, so seminary during the day, knowing that we were going to come back and start Crossover, and really believing that a lot of the brokenness in communities like ours is a result of folks not really trusting and following the Lord in all of life. Yeah. And so that's where it's like, when this whole idea of transformation comes from for us, and why we want to do it is no, the gospel changes people's lives. I saw it in my life where I was 180 degrees going against what God wanted and the design for our lives, and just really making a mess of my life. Almost threw it all away. Free, I had a football scholarship at the University of Tulsa and all of that. And had I stayed on that same path, I would have lost that scholarship. Yeah. And then just almost overnight, giving my life to Christ, and how I just changed that to where, just people who knew me after Christ didn't know what the old Philip was like. And so that's where it's like, no, the gospel transforms lives. And so we wanted to create a church that would help folks understand that and really understand God's word and live it out and all of that. And realizing too, early on, that it's like, it happens through relationships. And so it's like, the gospel changes your life as an individual.
Yes.
And then getting that, realizing that, no, like God wants his people to go out in the community and to be those agents of change and to build those relationships with folks to help others see what it really looks like to trust and follow Jesus in all of life. Because you know how it is, like nominal Christianity. Like everyone, especially in Oklahoma, we're in the Bible Belt, everyone's a Christian. But that was part of my story too. Like having some teammates who were genuine believers was also one of those things that's like, okay, they're saying they're Christians, I'm saying I'm a Christian, but their life is way different than mine. Yeah. And so that also helped me see that, like, okay, everything with me and God isn't the way I thought it was.
Thank you for sharing that. Well, let's talk about the EFCA a little bit. So you and I have the privilege of both being a part of the Evangelical Free Church of America. And before we started this conversation, you and I were reminiscing on my initial exposure to the EFCA. I was sharing my story with you, but if you wouldn't mind, for those who are watching, if you could just share, Philip, how did you first get connected with the EFCA? Was there a moment or a story where you said, "This is the movement I want to be a part of. These are the people that I want to do life with and do ministry with"? And what's made you stick around?
Yeah,
I mean, you've been around for a minute. I mean, what made you so?
Since 06.
Yeah.
So we planted as an EFCA church. And to be clear, I wasn't the initial church planter. I was like the associate pastor when we started. And so two of us planted the church together. And the other planter got connected with Bob Rowley, who at that time was the church planning coach or director of this district. And so then right after that, because we were going to become an independent Bible church. Okay. And so that's, that was our ethos and all of that. That's why we were named Crossover Bible Church. Right. But then hearing about the EFCA's intentionality to reach out to all people and just hearing about there's another network of just African-American pastors that we can get connected with. And so that's what really attracted us to it in the beginning. And honestly, the first 3 years, I didn't appreciate being a part of the EFCA. We would have our quarterly clusters. We called them clusters back then. And, the other guys were, they were older white guys that just didn't really resonate with all that much. And so kind of felt obligated to go to those meetings. But then when we went through our pastoral transition and I became the lead pastor out of nowhere, and it was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I was terrified. Our church was terrified. Wow. But then the way that the Free Church came around, Bob Rowley and other Free Church pastors, those older white guys that I didn't connect with became mentors to me. Wow. And then guys, the national office, Dante Upshaw was a part of the Free Church at that point. He would come in and did some leadership development for our leaders, and Luther coming to preach. And so it just really helped me appreciate being a part of a movement. So it's like when life happens and you really need community, being a part of the Free Church really, man, it touched us.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. So as you think about the EFCA, as we keep talking about the EFCA, what value does the EFCA provide for your ministry, specifically as it relates to this idea of multiplying transformation? We want to multiply transformational churches among all people. We want to transform our communities. We want to transform individuals' lives. What value does the EFCA provide for your ministry as it relates to this idea of multiplying transformation?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of who I am as a pastor is due in large part to the equipping that I got as part of the Free Church. Like, I got to participate in like a leadership development cohort. Being a part of the discipleship cohort that Shane Stacy led with Dave Rhodes. Like, that equipping that was stuff that I didn't get in seminary, but it was also books and things I was able to be exposed to. The Future Travelers cohort, where I got to connect with other like-minded pastors, a bunch of young guys like me who are like trying to see like, how do we do more than just be an attraction model church, but a church that reproduces at every level. Bob Rowley did a great job with our district and the conversations about multiplying at every level. And so being a part of the Free Church really helped make sure that we kept the main thing. Yes. Just this idea of multiplying at every level.
Yeah. Speaking of the Free Church, I would just like to just pause for a moment and say thank you for serving in some of the capacities you serve in the movement. You serve as our moderator. Now you sit on our EFCA board of directors. And so as busy as you are with your family, with the ministry here, and I'll thank you for really being a deep part of the movement and contributing as a valued leader. So, Philip, let's keep talking about this transformation a little bit more. How did your heart for transformation influence the ministry here at Crossover and the subsequent community impact that God is using? Because you're quick to give God the credit for all of this, right. But the subsequent impact that God is making through the ministry here on North Tulsa to move beyond a Sunday morning church. So your heart for transformation, influencing Crossover's heart for transformation, impacting North Tulsa so that this is more than just a Sunday morning church.
Right. Yeah, and I would say it goes back to when you look at the brokenness of our community. And I would say all communities are broken at a certain level. But just how it manifests itself here in our community, where you have like over 60% of our kids are born to unwed mothers. And the chances of you having kids out of wedlock go up when you grew up out of wedlock. Right. And just how these cycles of poverty and brokenness continue to perpetuate themselves. And like I said, I was on that same path and then realizing that the gospel is what broke that cycle in my life. And really saying like, okay, this is really the key. The gospel can break that cycle better than anything that I know of. But then it was like, okay, let's have this solid church, gospel proclaiming, teaching the Bible solidly, but realize early on that we can have a great Sunday morning program, and that only matters to the people that come on Sunday mornings. So it's like, how do we get the gospel to folks that have no intention of coming on a Sunday morning? And I had done the whole cold turkey evangelism stuff too, and that's not effective in my opinion. Like, learning how to share your faith is effective when it comes to learning how to share your faith. Right. But it's like that old saying that people have to know how much you care before they care how much you know. Right. And so it was like, okay, we have the answer, we have the solutions in the gospel, and we have a group of folks that aren't going to come to us to hear it. Right. So it's like, how do we take the gospel out to the people and not do it in a weird kind of way? And that's where it's like, how do we tangibly build relationships with folks through serving them and connecting with them in that way? And so that's where it was like, through coaching a youth football team and the relationships that we got to build. And I like to say that we were able to figure all this out, but it was God who had to kind of show us that he dumped this ministry opportunity in our laps. And so just through coaching a youth football team at the community center where we met, we got to see like, okay, this is how we can build relationships with families. This is how we get to have some deep, meaningful conversations with people. Because I'm not an outgoing guy. And so it wasn't like I could just go and sit in a coffee shop or something like that and just build relationships.
Yeah, that's not you.
Yeah, that's just not my personality. But I did know football. Yeah. And so coaching football and, caring for the kids is what created some bridges to be able to have deep relationships and conversations with people.
I've been able to visit you here in the community and see what some of the things you're doing in the community. So, for example, you have some of your people who actually live in proximity to the church in the community here in North Tulsa, Tulsa as an example. If you could just chat about that a moment, how their decision to move actually within the neighborhood.
Right. So like I said, the gospel flows through relationships, and proximity is huge when it comes to relationships. And so when we're talking about doing ministry and serving in an under-resourced community, the fact that we're a part of this community too speaks volumes, especially when you look at our diversity as a church. I mean, it says a lot when you have a white guy who lives next door to you in a community that a lot of people were trying to get out of. Yeah. And so it's like, oh, wow, he must really care because he's here. You know, folks, first it starts with suspicion. You're like, okay, is he a drug dealer or something? But then when he's like, no, he's here and he cares and he's serving. And so, yeah, having folks move in the community has been a game changer for us. And so we do require that of our full-time staff because we say restoring our community. And so we want that to literally be true. But then to see a lot of our church members who are also doing it, even though it's not required, but they see the value of being able to connect with your next door neighbors and your kids playing with their kids and the relationships that happen from just being present in the community.
And that can happen in any community that we find ourselves in as Free Church people, whether it's in the suburbs, whether it's in North Tulsa, whether it's out in a rural community, wherever we are, we can leverage those relationships for the sake of the gospel. And this is just the way that you're doing it in this community here in North Tulsa. So Pastor Philip, as pastors pursue this pathway of transformation through relationships, there are going to be obstacles that they face, potential potholes, ways that they could veer off the road. What encouragement would you offer them for pressing on and pressing through potential obstacles that they might experience? And maybe you could share one or two that come to mind that you would see as potential obstacles, and then what word of encouragement would you have for pressing on and pressing through that and not stopping?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that one of the big challenges is just our own selfishness, you know, and how we can, it's like inertia drives us to focus inward in the church. And it's like, yes, we should be pastoral in the sense the health of the folks that God brings to the church, but then we can make it all about just the church and our members worried about their needs being met and their children's ministry being the right way. And so this kind of consumerism feedback loop can really take our eyes off of making disciples who make disciples outside of the church. And it's like, we can focus and think that everything's great because it's great, you know, our budget's good or we're growing and all of that, and we haven't made any kind of impact in the community outside of us. And so it's just like always having clarity on what's the win. And it is that, like, who is walking with Jesus that wasn't walking with Jesus before? And it's like seeing as life changes and people making different decisions, you know, than they were before. And so, and it's been cool seeing all the things that God is doing, but it's like here at Crossover, we're not satisfied until disciples are making disciples, because that's the win. And so we see like the community center that we've just built as a tool for that. And so it's like we won't be satisfied, one, until Jesus comes back. But we want to see disciples who are making disciples. And it's like, yes, we want to take care of the folks that God has brought us and shepherd them well, but we also want to push them to make disciples who make disciples. And until that happens, we won't be satisfied as a church.
And the EFCA won't be satisfied because we want to multiply transformational churches among all people. And as you described that, this whole relational transformation, it reminds me of your story. I just keep thinking of your story, your story, your story. And so now God, because he saved you wonderfully, is using you to multiply his gospel story through you to others who are then multiplying to others. So it all fits.
Right.
How could we be prepared as local church pastors to support our people as they seek to do this relational, transformative work? Any word for pastors as to how we can be prepared to support?
Yeah. And I would say, first give your folks a vision for the idea of we've got to go to the people. That it's like we go to them, we're the church, and we're called to the people, and that it happens through relationships. But then that's where it's like you can build relationships with folks by doing tangible acts of love and service. And so it's like, how can you love and serve your community in a way that builds relationships and not just a bunch of one-off stuff?
Right.
And so it's like helping folks get a vision for that. And then, you know, pastors, we're called to equip the saints for the work of the ministry.
Yes.
And so it's like helping them get a vision for that and then equipping them towards that end. And that's one of the things I love about what we do at Crossover is folks are seeing ways that like non-traditional spiritual gifts and ways of serving become ways to build relationships and do kingdom work. So it's like we have a construction crew, and it's through that, like our site managers and all of that, like they get to disciple the guys that are on their crew.
Yes.
And he's like, one of our guys has like he was a mechanic at one point. And so now he's like working on houses and all that. And he's getting to like life on life disciple guys. And he probably never thought that just being really good with his hands and doing all that was going to be the very thing that God was going to use for him to be able to make disciples.
So it's provided an opportunity for him to be apprenticed as a follower of Jesus Christ, as well as in a trade, in a sense. He's getting 2 for 1.
Right.
And the most important one is his life being transformed by Jesus. So, there's a temptation, having served as a pastor for many years, where when we're exposed to particular ministries or churches, we see things about it that we really appreciate and respect, and the temptation's there to go back and try to, in a good way, copy some of that, to kind of be like Philip or be like Crossover. But not every church's story will look like Crossover, because you're one brother who's God is uniquely gifted and placed in this moment of time in North Tulsa. Not everyone pastors in North Tulsa. Not everyone is you, Pastor Philip. So what would your encouragement to pastors be, how their church in their unique environment can take some steps toward transformation?
Right. One, you got to know who you are, like individually as a pastor, but know who your church is. And you got to know your community. We started with youth sports because youth sports was huge in our community. Like folks, even if they're struggling financially, they will find a way for their child to get involved in sports. And so we wanted to leverage that for the sake of the gospel. And so know what your community does well. And on the youth sports side, I coached football. I played football. So I knew that was something that I could step into. But it's like, what's your community story? And like, how is the gospel good news for your community? And so, don't try to do what we do. But it is that. It's like, how do you take the gospel to your community in a relational and transformational way? And that is going to look different because all of our communities are different. And there could be some similarities, but, one of the things we've learned and are still learning is like, your kids can be your greatest resource when it comes to engaging on mission, because we do a lot with our kids, through our kids. Just do it with gospel intentionality, like youth sports, like it is a thing that you don't necessarily have to start your own program, but as folks are having their kids involved with sports, being intentional about praying for the team and praying for salvations of folks and building relationships. And so there's all kind of ways to just serve and connect with folks for the sake of the gospel.
So I have a final question for you. What's something, as you think about the ministry right now, in your life right now, that just puts a massive smile on your face, that just fills you with joy, that you just feel your joy overflows? It might be a story of someone's life transformation, a specific person, or a ministry that's taking place out of here, or I don't know, wide open, but something that comes to mind that you go, that just fills me with joy to overflowing.
Right. I mean, I would say when we see folks getting it, and especially like the approach we take is like, you got to be in it for the long haul, because it takes, years to develop leaders from the ground up. But it's like we've been at it long enough where it's like we're seeing kids, where they're kids in the program who are now on the verge of, they're going off to college and walking with the Lord and having a passion and a heart for that. And so seeing that, having like one of our site directors for our after school program was herself a street leader in that program. So that's our high schoolers that we hire as mentors and tutors. She was a street leader, came to faith, then went off to college, and now has come back and is leading the program. And so to see stories like that where it's like, okay, generational change can happen, that's the stuff that really gets me excited when you see a kid who Oh man, there's another kid. I'll talk one more student, one of our seniors graduating, who's participated in like our dorm program, and so who has a great family, mom loves him, all of that, single parent, and he's seen that, but like being around our folks, like our principal and his family and all of that, and he even said he's like, I love my mom, love my grandma, and all of that, but I see your family picture. He's like, I want a picture like that.
Wow.
And so to have a kid that's a senior in high school that has that much self-awareness and wanting to do that, and he participates and helps lead worship for convocation and all of that, and he's about to go off to college, but we get excited about those kind of stories.
That's great.
And knowing that he plans on coming back someday. He keeps joking about he's going to take my job, but the fact that he wants to come back and lead in the community is what this is all about for me.
Yeah. Well, Pastor Philip, it's a privilege to be here with you and just to hear your heart and feel your heart, to be in this sacred space that God has entrusted to you and your other leaders. And I would just say to those who are watching us that one of my favorite lines from C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia is, Aslan's on the move. And I would say from my experience, having been here a couple of times, Aslan is clearly on the move here in North Tulsa through the ministry of what God is doing here at Crossover. And I just pray that you will continue to persevere. Don't lose heart. Your labor is not in vain. And thank you for your warm hospitality and for taking time out of your busy schedule to just sit and chat with me for a bit. Thank you so much, Pastor Phil.